How are stop motion games made and how to fake them? Stop motion games no doubt have one of the most distinctive art styles out there. They're also one of the hardest ways to make a video game. Every frame is a real photograph. The characters are physically posed by hand, photographed, moved a tiny bit, and photographed again. When these images are played in sequence, they create the illusion of life. Of course, this works brilliantly for TV shows and films. But games aren't films. Games are interactive. Players can walk, jump, attack, and maybe even hit a griddy. So, how do you make stop motion interactive? The answer is surprisingly simple. You don't photograph a movie, you photograph actions. Walking is one action, jumping is another, attacking is another. These images are then imported into the game engine as animation sequences, much like sprite sheets. When the player performs an action, the engine simply plays the corresponding sequence of images. This brings up an interesting question. Stop motion is known for its low frame rate. Many stop motion animations are shot at 12 FPS or lower. So how can a stop motion game run smoothly? Well, the animation and the rest of the game can run at different frame rates. The physics, the camera, and the player input can run at 60 FPS, while the character animation is limited to 12 FPS. That's why stop motion games can still feel responsive. But if stop motion is this demanding, how are smaller studios pulling it off? Making a real stop motion game is incredibly expensive. Every character has to be physically modeled, every prop has to exist in the real world, every environment has to be built by hand. Unlike digital art, redesigning something isn't always as simple as pressing undo. That's why many games that look like stop motion aren't actually stop motion at all. Many modern stop motion games don't use photographs. They are ordinary 3D games. The characters are regular 3D models and the animations are created just like any other game. However, developers have come up with a variety of techniques to recreate the stop motion look. One of the most common tricks is something we have already covered, reducing the animation playback rate to something like 12 FPS. But of course, lowering the frame rate alone doesn't magically make an animation look like stop motion. Real stop motion is imperfect. It's messy. The clay bends slightly with every pose. A hand doesn't always land in the same spot. And there are subtleties in lighting. These tiny irregularities accumulate, and strangely enough, that is exactly what makes stop motion feel special. To recreate this feeling, developers focus on the small details. Slight jitters in movement, tiny variation between poses, and materials that look molded by hand instead of generated by a computer. The goal here is not realism. It is to create the illusion of something physical. Here's the thing. Apart from reducing production costs, there's another reason to fake stop motion. It's about circumventing the limitations the medium brings. Want dynamic lighting? Good luck. Want to freely rotate the camera around the character? Forget it. In a modern 3D game, lighting can change dynamically, shadows can move in real time, and the camera can freely orbit the world. Traditional stop motion doesn't have that luxury. Every photograph is locked in time, making dynamic changes difficult or sometimes even impossible. But not every developer takes a fully digital approach. Some blur the line between physical and the virtual. Games like Halibut use handcrafted characters, just like traditional stop motion. But instead of photographing their poses, they scan them into computers, rig them like normal 3D characters, and animate them digitally. The result is something that sits between traditional stop motion and modern 3D, a style that preserves the handmade look while gaining the flexibility of a digital world. This idea of creating convincing illusions is not new. Decades before stop-motion inspired games became popular, developers were already using a similar trick: pre-rendered graphics. Highly detailed 3D scenes and characters are rendered beforehand and then used inside the game, much like photographs. Since the images are computed offline, artists can spend far more time rendering each frame, achieving levels of details and realism that real-time graphics often struggle to match. This technique allowed games to look far more advanced than the machines running them should have allowed. Games like Roller Coaster Tycoon, Donkey Kong Country are classic examples of this approach. Making a stop-motion game can feel simpler than building a fully digital one. You don't necessarily need to master every aspect of the traditional 3D pipeline. You can sculpt characters by hand, build miniature worlds, and bring them into a game in a way that feels tangible. But calling it easy would be short-sighted. Stop motion is indeed simple in concept, but incredibly demanding in practice. And perhaps that's what makes it so rewarding. You don't just design a character on a screen. You hold it in your hands, you shape its expressions, you pose it, and little by little, something that once existed only in your imagination begins to move, breathe, and come alive. That's a feeling that I believe no software can quite replicate. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. Also, for exclusive content, check out my Patreon. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.